Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're tackling one of the biggest, most heated debates in nutrition, plants versus meat. We're going to cut right through all the noise, the opinions, the ideology, and get straight to what the scientific research actually shows.
So, here's the big question we're trying to answer. Is there solid scientific proof that a plant-based diet is actually healthier? Look, we're not here for opinions. We're just here to follow the evidence wherever it takes us.
So, how are we going to do this? Well, first, we'll dig into the biggest, most credible studies out there. Then, we'll get into the biology, why these diets might actually work. And then, importantly, we're going to face the counter evidence head on before we land on a final science-backed verdict. Okay, first things first. Before we can even start comparing, we have to know what we're comparing, right? We need to be crystal clear on how scientists define these diets and where all this data even comes from. Yeah, it's not as simple as just vegetarians versus meat eaters. In research, it's broken down. You've got vegans who exclude all animal products. You've got lacto-ovo vegetarians who skip meat and fish but still have dairy and eggs. And then on the other side, you have pesco-vegetarians who eat fish, semi-vegetarians, and of course, omnivores. Knowing these groups is really key to understanding the results. And just so you know, we're not talking about some small 2-week study here. The evidence we're digging into is the real deal. It comes from these massive, long-term studies. We're talking the Adventist Health Study, EPIC Oxford, the UK Biobank. These are studies that follow tens, even hundreds of thousands of people for decades to see what happens. That's the gold standard. All right, so with that groundwork laid, let's jump into what the bulk of the evidence actually shows. What are the patterns that keep popping up again and again in these huge studies? Let's start with a number that honestly speaks volumes. 23.6. That's the average BMI for vegans in the Adventist Health Study. Now compare that to 28.8 for non-vegetarians, a number that pushes the average right into the overweight category. That's a huge difference, and it's a finding we see consistently. And check this out. This chart really drives home a crucial point about metabolic health. In that same study, about 7.6% of non-vegetarians had type 2 diabetes. For vegans, just 2.9%. That is a massive drop in risk, showing a really powerful link between diet and this disease. So what's going on here biologically? It's not magic, you know? It really boils down to two things. What you're getting less of in a plant-based diet, like saturated fat, and what you're getting way more of, like fiber, and these amazing anti-inflammatory compounds. Let's talk about fiber for a second, because it's an absolute superstar, and you only find it in plant foods. It slows down how fast sugar hits your bloodstream, which is great for blood sugar control. It can literally grab onto cholesterol and pull it out of your body. And it feeds all the good bacteria in your gut, which we're learning affects pretty much everything. Okay, but it's not all sunshine and roses. The story gets a little more complex. And to get the full, honest picture, we have to look at the data that doesn't quite fit this simple plants are better narrative. And this is a big one. A huge analysis from the EPIC Oxford study, the one with over 60,000 people, found something really interesting. When they looked at overall mortality, dying from any cause, vegetarians didn't actually live any longer than the health-conscious meat eaters in the same study. So let's dig into that a little deeper. When we look at why people were dying, the risk from heart disease was pretty much a wash between the groups. But here's the twist. Vegetarians actually showed a 21% higher risk of dying from cerebrovascular disease, which is mainly stroke. So you see this term hazard ratio? What on earth does that mean? Well, think of it this way. 1 means the risk is identical. A hazard ratio of 2 would mean double the risk. So 1.21 is a 21% increase. Now, this doesn't prove that a vegetarian diet causes stroke. Researchers think it might be tied to lower levels of things like vitamin B12. It just shows that the relationship isn't always so simple. So what does all this start to suggest? Well, maybe the label we slap on a diet, vegetarian or omnivore, isn't the most important thing. Maybe it's all about the quality of the food you're actually putting in your body. And I mean, this is just common sense, right? You can be a vegetarian and live on French fries, sugary drinks, and potato chips. That is a universe away from someone eating a diet based on whole grains, beans, and kale. Both are plant-based, but you know their health effects are going to be completely different. And this isn't just a theory. We have data to back this up. Research from a Spanish study really highlights this. People who followed a healthy plant-based diet had a 32% lower risk of dying, but the people following an unhealthy plant-based diet, no benefit at all. It's a powerful reminder. Quality is king.
And that brings us to a really practical point. If you're going to eat a plant-based diet, you have to be smart about it. There are certain nutrients you really need to keep an eye on. Vitamin B12 is a non-negotiable. You have to supplement. And you need a plan for getting enough iron, omega-3s, vitamin D, and calcium. Okay, so after looking at all of this, the good, the complicated, and the nuances, where do we land? What is the final evidence-based verdict here?
Here's the bottom line. The evidence is pretty overwhelming that a well-planned diet, one that's centered on whole plant foods, gives you a real, measurable advantage against some of the biggest health problems we face today, especially things like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And let's be really clear about something. This isn't about saying meat is toxic or one diet is good and the other is evil. That's not what the science says. It's that a dietary pattern that is packed with all the good stuff from plants, the fiber, the vitamins, the antioxidants, well, that just seems to be a winning formula for long-term health. The benefit comes from what you're adding in. So where does that leave you? Look, this isn't about telling you to throw everything out of your fridge tomorrow. It's just a question to think about. What's one small step you could take? What's one plant-forward change you could try this week? Because really, the power to improve your health, it's right there on your plate.